Hi, I'm Jean Ann Wright, and by now you know that I have designed a number of strip piecing rulers for quilters to use so that they can make accurate blocks every time with no math and no measuring. My newest tool is the Curvy log cabin trim tool. It's in the same size, 8 inches, as my original trim tool, so the two can be used together. And on this Curvy tool, we now have narrow strips on one side of the blocks and wide strips on the other. So you get this nice rolling curve when you sew the blocks together. Now the center square is cut 1 3/4 inches, and it's a small square. So we've marked the ruler so that you can line up your center square and then through the holes in the rulers dot where your seam intersections are. And I've marked this one with a Sharpie so that you can see them clearly in the video, but I generally just use a pencil. So once I know that I'm going to have that, I sew my first 2 strips around, and they are the wide strips. So using the wide side of the ruler, I put this here, I use my rotary cutter, and I cut the first 2 sides. All of this is just to help me get my first round really square, because once that's really square, then the rest just fall together very easily. I don't know what's wrong with it. I have a new blade, you wouldn't know it. So now I sew the other 2 strips around, and I'm ready to trim the narrow side. So I turn the ruler a half turn and line up my centering square for the first narrow round, and they are labeled so you clearly know which you should use, whether you're doing narrow or wide strips. We've labeled everything for you, and for me, I always need the labels. And now I'm going to turn it around so I can just trim off these where they slightly overlap. So I turn my ruler again, and using the markers for the wide strips, I trim those 2 pieces. So now this is perfectly sized, and I'm ready to add my next round of strips. So now I go on ahead and add my 2 wides and my 2 narrows all the way around. And so I'm going to trim the narrow side first. So I turn my ruler again and use the one that says narrow round 2, line it all up, and trim. So once those are trimmed off, I give both the ruler and the block a half turn. And the reason I'm doing this, of course, is because we always trim away from our bodies. And so now that one is trimmed. And now this is perfectly sized again. So if your sewing machine has made a slight error and you've got a seam a little off, you're correcting that slight error in sewing when you do your trimming. So now this is also perfectly sized. So now we're going to add our third and final round of strips. I always start with the narrow. I'm not sure why, but I do. And now is when my rotating mat comes in to help. So I line this up with the centering square, which says round 3, and I trim 2 sides like so. And here's where I have my little bit of fun for the day, because I'm just going to rotate my mat rather than move my ruler and my thing. This way I'm getting an 8-inch perfect block when I'm done without having to realign it. And trim my other 2 sides. There you have it. And I have a perfect 8.5-inch curvy log cabin block. So you say, what do I do with that? Well, I have made 4 blocks to show you that by putting 4 blocks together, you can get 2 different designs. This one is the diamond design. And in this design, I have put all of my light strips together to make the diamond. And you can see here's the diamond with the light strips on the insides and the dark on the outside. But the really cool thing about this ruler is it also makes a circle. So to make the circle, I'm putting my dark strips together, like so. And now you can see I have the circle. And that's the wonderful thing about this ruler. Now I'm going to show you some quilts that I have made using the ruler. And this one I call hopscotch. It's a cut loose pattern, so you can order the patterns right along with your rulers so your customers will be ready to go. Now this one I made using a jelly roll, or 2.5-inch pre-cuts for the dark and yardage for the light. And the pattern tells you how much yardage you need. And you can see here's my diamond right here, all sewed together, and then here is my circle. And so it's very easy to do. And I alternated circles and squares throughout the hopscotch quilt to make a quilt that looks like this. And it was fun and easy to make. I actually made the whole thing in 3 days. Then the other nice thing about the rulers is they make making these blocks very quick, because you're not pre-cutting, you're not spending a day getting ready by cutting before you can start to sew. You start sewing right away. So then I decided I was going to play with this ruler a little bit more, and so I made courthouse step blocks. Now the block goes right here, and I wanted to have a modern look, so I used these colors, and I used my white for the larger part of the blocks and my color for the narrower part of the blocks. And then I just turned them like this. This pattern is called Texas two-step. This Texas two-step pattern and the hopscotch patterns are cut loose patterns. And here's another pattern that I've done called Carousel. And this one has diamonds and with alternating light and dark diamonds. And that's how I put this quilt together. So all of the patterns can be found at your local quilt shop. So there's a lot of possibilities and different things you can do with this one ruler. The only limits are your own imaginations. So have fun using the ruler and learning to make new and exciting things, and all of it, all accurate and all in very little time.